You're watching The World from Below, and we spend the rest of today's episode discussing the situation in Gaza. The Israeli Defence Force launched what they've called Operation Protective Edge on the Gaza Strip on the 8th of July, the latest escalation of the conflict between Israel in the occupied territories of Palestine. The conflict is the deadliest military operation to have taken place in Gaza this decade, with reports estimating up to 1,900 Palestinians killed in the month-long operation, many of them women and children. Israeli troops began withdrawing last Sunday, with negotiations ongoing in Cairo. To further discuss the ramifications of this conflict, we're joined today by Samah Sabawi and Dr. Jordy Silverstein. Samah Sabawi is an author, political analyst and playwright. She's a policy advisor for the Palestinian policy network Al-Shabaka. Dr. Jordy Silverstein is a historian of modern Jewish identities and sexualities based at the University of Melbourne. Jordy is a member of the Australian Jewish Democratic Society, which describes itself as a progressive voice amongst Jews and a Jewish voice amongst progressives. Samah, what do you think will be the outcome of negotiations taking place this week in Cairo?
It's very difficult to tell what the outcome will be. I think it's important to understand what is being called for and who is calling for it. One of the most important demands that the Palestinians are taking to the negotiation is the demand to lift the siege of Gaza. The siege has lasted for 8 years, and it has left Gaza economically crippled. It has left children malnutritioned. It has interfered with people's daily lives, even to the point where Israel is actually counting the calories to keep the Palestinians suffering but not quite dying of starvation. So I think the most important thing that the Palestinians in Gaza are asking for is, of course, the lifting of the siege. Other demands include the release of some of the prisoners, as the opening of a seaport under international observers, and of course the idea of having an airport so that the Gaza Strip is not totally reliant on its two neighbors, Egypt and Israel, in order for people to get in and out, to have that kind of basic freedom. So that's what they're going, and that's what they're demanding in Egypt right now. Of course, Israel's demands are to demilitarize the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, namely Hamas, and to maintain control as much as possible. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to come out of this. We've got 72 hours. We're in day 2 now of the 72-hour ceasefire. There is talk that it might be extended. And there's already a sentiment on the ground in Gaza that if this is a status quo that's going to last for much longer, there is going to be a lot of reaction on the ground. People have literally had enough, and they really want to have their freedom. And I think they will stop at nothing to have that freedom.
You've come out in support of a two-state solution in the past as a way of establishing peace and hopefully an end to the conflict in the region. How likely do you think that is for this as an outcome of this particular negotiation?
I think my support for the two-state solution was many, many years ago. Since 2009, I've stopped trying to have an opinion on whether it should be one state or two state, because I came to the realization that what we actually have on the ground and have had since 1967 is one state. So when we're talking about changing the status quo from what exists to what we want to be, where we want to be heading, we have to consider all the political context. Israel has forced a one-state reality on the Palestinian people. It has total control of Gaza and of the West Bank. And this is something that always comes up when we're looking at the coverage of the war on Gaza. A lot of the media treats it like it's a separate entity. Gaza is not separate from historic Palestine, and it certainly is not separate from Israel. It's under Israeli occupation. And so Israel has ruled over and controlled the lives of Palestinians, whether be it in Gaza or in the West Bank, since 1967. So I think my thinking after Cast-Led went towards the direction of saying, what do we have right now? What are we living with? And we're being forced to accept a one-state reality, and Israel is enforcing this one-state reality. Most Palestinians, I think, have wanted the two-state solution, want to have their own state, definitely want to have their own flag and their own borders and their own autonomy. But the reality is Israel is doing everything possible to make this impossible. And so we have to look beyond what the international community is dictating to us, which is getting trapped in a language about one state or two states, and move from that to talking about the language of human rights and what we demand. We demand our freedom. We demand to live equally as the Jewish people on this land. That we are living together. We're just not living as equals right now.
Dr. Jordy Silverstein, do you agree?
I agree with pretty much all that Samah has said. I think that a lot of the discussion around one state, two state is really based on this idea that Jews and Palestinians fundamentally can't get along, right? That there's this sort of intransigence that there's always going to be military conflict. And I think that's incorrect. I think there's just no reason why that has to be the case. And I think, that everybody needs to be working really hard against that narrative and to frame the discussion around these kinds of concepts of justice, of equal rights, of access to, of self-determination, of control over lives and over the future of the group. So I think, I'd agree that it's a kind of what the future holds in terms of how many states or no states. I think that's almost also a bit of a distraction. Yeah. There's day-to-day issues that I think really need to be taken care of, and that is primarily at the moment, lifting the siege, and also, being aware that at the same time Israel's been attacking Gaza. That's been a very good cover to do all sorts of other things to Bedouins in the Negev, to Palestinians in the West Bank. So it's not, they kind of distract us in a way, and it's hard to remember, it becomes difficult to remember at times that Palestinians are, a group who are spread over a very wide space, being treated differently in those over that space, but still are one group who requires self-determination of some form.
And yet, just on the idea of living together, I went to visit Gaza in 1996 during the beginning of the Oslo years, and I remember getting in a bus with a group of friends and driving all the way up to Acre by the sea in the north of Israel. And I remember just seeing how people actually were feeling safe around each other because they thought they had a plan. They actually thought and believed that we were on track to some kind of a peaceful coexistence. Most people want that. But I think that the leadership, especially the Israeli leadership and the Likudnik groups and the settlers have done everything possible to not only make this not happen, but to also sell the idea to the people that we can't coexist.
And any form of, I guess, coexistence or living together isn't really about covering over the vast problems, and isn't about, saying that everybody can just be happy and we're all friends, and that kind of discourse around Jews and Palestinians can be friends, I think, can also kind of work to cover over some really serious issues of injustice and discrimination. So it's about dealing with all of those kinds of issues and then actually living together in a more substantial way, I think.
Tell me, Jordy, you would have seen that Fairfax columnist Mike Carlton has resigned after getting into a dispute with his editors about responses and how he dealt with responses to his column about Gaza. What do you make of his resignation? Yeah,
it seems, I guess all I know about it is what's been reported in today's press about it. And it's quite clear that his resignation has come as a result of great pressure from various lobby groups, and it's clear, that there's people within Zionist lobby who put a lot of pressure on Fairfax to discipline him, that he wasn't interested in being disciplined, and so he resigned. I think that it's a very good representation of the inability to have a conversation that's really going on, and it's something that you kind of see if you look at the various ways in which people write their columns and the ways that people talk on Twitter or on Facebook. It's really clear we're having different conversations. We just have fundamentally different understandings of what's going on and of the history of why it's going on. And it seems like this is a real product of that. So I guess it kind of feels like this, that it's incredibly unnecessary that someone should have to resign. It's, I think, a great shame for the media, for debate.
You're watching The World from Below. We're going to take a break and we'll be back shortly. Stay with us.